Welcome back, everyone. This is Ex Post Watcho, where we rewatch movies from our past and see how they hold up. My name is Ilana, and I'm here with my friend
Jason.
And today we are going to talk about Legends of the Fall. Jason, have you seen this movie?
I haven't seen this movie, and I know pretty much nothing about it.
What do you know about it?
I know that what the poster looks like, because I'm looking at it right now. I know that Brad Pitt and Anthony Hopkins are in it, as well as someone named Adam Quinn.
Aidan
Quinn.
Oh, boy. Okay, this should be interesting. So, you have no expectations of anything going into this, or?
No, I know nothing about it. It's set in the past. I don't know what period of time in the past. It just looks like a long time ago. So we'll find out when.
Wow, I had some notes about what I think general expectations are of this film versus what I think this film more is, and how you might be surprised based on what your expectations might be. But I don't think I'm even going to tell you, because I don't want to spoil anything for you.
Okay, well, here's an expectation that I've just now set, which is I've seen the running time is 133 minutes. So now it has to pass a crucial test, which is the 90-minute test, which is every minute this movie is longer than 90 minutes. It has to justify that quite well. So I'm going to have to really settle in for this one.
It's an epic story, that's for sure. 95. So I definitely didn't see this when it first came out, but I saw it when I was fairly young, and I've seen it several times since, and I was fairly neutral. I thought it was fine. And then I watched it in 2013 with my friend Christina before we went to the Sasquatch Music Festival. And I really had a newfound appreciation for this movie, I think, at that point. So this is Edward Zwick, whose name I didn't recognize, but he did Courage Under Fire, The Last Samurai, Blood Diamond, Love and Other Drugs. He did one of the Jack Reacher movies. So he kind of does these big, beautiful looking films. I think this won an Academy Award for Best Cinematography as well, and was nominated for Best Picture. It's just a huge epic thing. I think people have expectations that this is a movie for women, and that it's just like Brad Pitt in a river, bathing or whatever.
Okay, now you're setting some expectations.
But I think it's actually a lot more complicated and more interesting than that. This movie is a lot of things. I hope it holds up for me, and I hope that you are, I can't even say pleasantly surprised, because, you're going to see Brad Pitt in a river, but beyond that, I guess you don't really know what to expect. I'm really interested to see how you're going to feel about this movie. I hope you like it, or at the very least, don't hate it. I don't think you will. It's going to be beautiful in any case, but I know it is a bit long for your taste, so I'm curious to see what you'll have to say about it.
Yeah, this one just never crossed my radar somehow. Sorry, I'm not giving you much to work with here, but I don't know. I'm going to go on the strength of this poster, and you're telling me that it is not, as they say, a chick flick. Hopefully, it'll be good.
All right. Well, I think we should stop there, because I don't want to give anything away, and I'm excited for you to go and watch this. So let's go watch this movie, and we'll be back soon to talk about your very first Legends of the Fall viewing experience. Okay, we're back. We have just watched Legends of the Fall. Jason, this was your first Legends of the Fall viewing experience. I actually cannot wait to hear your initial thoughts about it.
Okay, I feel pretty positive about this movie. I enjoyed it. It definitely does fall into a category. I used the derisive term earlier, chick flick. We don't say that anymore, but that certainly was an idea people understood for a long time. This is a movie that my mom would have rented when I was a kid, and I would have walked into the living room on a Sunday and seen 5 minutes of it and just been like, this looks fucking boring. This looks like the most boring shit ever. But now I am older and wiser and more refined, And I can actually appreciate a story like this, or a movie like this. It really is. It's a story about some characters and a family and what happens to them over a period of time. And that, it's presented in a very straightforward way, I would say. Like, it's not a very flashy movie. It looks nice because of the locations. It was filmed in Alberta and BC, substituting for Montana, which I think works pretty well. But really what the movie is the characters and what happens to them over the course of the movie. And I kind of walk away feeling different ways about the different characters, which I think is a sign of a good movie. So yeah, overall, positive. I liked it.
Good. I'm glad, because I know when we talked about this before we went off and watched it, I was like, I think it's not just a, movie for anyone who wants to drool over Brad Pitt. And then as I was watching it, I was like, oh boy, this is pretty heavy-handed with the romance and the longing and the lustfulness. So I was like, uh-oh.
It is a Brad Pitt drooling vehicle.
Yeah. But yeah, actually I agree with you, and I enjoyed watching this as well again, because it has been about 7 years since I saw it last. I enjoy this movie. I think there's a bit of comfort in it because, of course, we live in the provinces where this was filmed. There's a familiarity to it. I grew up on a farm. I feel like, there's stuff about it that feels very comforting. And Brad Pitt to me is very comforting because I feel like he was everywhere at this time. And I was starting to discover movies probably around the time this came out. And I think this movie and A River Runs Through It. Do you remember that one?
I remember the title. Couldn't say anything about the movie.
Yeah, he's in that too. I can barely remember it, but I think I've kind of merged the two in my brain because I really don't remember. His butt's in that movie, I think. And I remember, as a kid, you're like, oh my God, it's a butt. Yeah, I find this very comforting. And I do like it. I like Westerns as well. And this is kind of a Western. It's kind of a war movie. It's kind of a family drama. It's kind of a Prohibition era gangster film. And it's also kind of a romance. So it's like in my notes, what I said was this movie is a lot. It might be too much for some people. It's definitely big. It just totally goes for it. Like it makes no apology. It's like this movie is enormous and it's this sweeping period drama. There's romance. There's everything could have been so much cheesier than it was. And I feel like it sort of like teeters on that edge quite a few times, but I don't think it ever fully goes there. And I think it's because everybody clearly fully 100% commits to this. And I think then you can actually connect with these characters. And like you said, with this story that follows this family over a period of time, and you do sympathize with them and you feel things for them. And it's quite complicated, I think, their relationships. And then watching them, there were a lot of times when I really hated a character. And then the next scene, I just like my heart was bleeding for them, right? I cried 6 times watching this. So this was an emotional journey for myself.
I didn't outright break into tears, but I definitely there was a bunch of parts where I was starting to get the redness going. I think it does that pretty well. So the movie does do a lot of things. I think the things it does the most of are the romance and the family drama, and then everything else is kind of just part of the package, I guess. It's interesting because I saw the word melodrama used to describe it, and I'll admit I don't actually know what the definition of melodrama is, but I actually felt like it felt kind of realistic and grounded, like the performances and stuff like that. Like it, well, okay, maybe there's 1 or 2 scenes where it's a bit much, I guess, but a lot of the conflict with the family and they're yelling at each other and getting in each other's faces and stuff like that. I thought those moments felt like convincing. They seemed realistic and not over the top.
I agree with you. There were a few scenes that seemed a bit over the top for me, but okay, so I just looked up the definition of melodrama. A sensational dramatic piece with exaggerated characters and exciting events intended to appeal to the emotions. I think that's accurate.
I guess, but I mean, you could make that case for a lot of movies, you know?
I think that melodrama has this connotation of being like maybe a bad thing, of being like soap opera-y. I was looking at Roger Ebert's review of this. He called it a high-class horse opera. I thought that was pretty fitting. So yeah, it's the early 1900s is when we start. We end in the mid 1900s. Anthony Hopkins is this badass colonel who kind of got out of the game, moved into the woods in Montana, moved out west. Mom was like, fuck no, I'm going back to the city. So he's raising these boys kind of in the Wild West. But they're still getting this sort of education and sense of, I don't know, the city life, education, higher learning from their mom, and their dad's clearly an educated man. We don't really get too much of their childhood, but I have to say those three brothers, the young boys that they cast, looked exactly like the grown actors.
Yeah, the young Brad Pitt kid was bang on.
Yeah.
It took me a moment to actually realize, like, wait, that's not Brad Pitt. This is some younger kid.
Playing Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they kind of set us up like Tristan, who's okay, so there are three brothers. Alfred, who's the oldest, he's kind of like the uptight.
He's
follower.
older beyond his years.
Yes.
They describe him as.
Okay, well, let's address this immediately. As soon as this started, because there is a person narrating this story, and as soon as it started, I was like, oh no, here we go with like the Wild West, wise old storyteller, Native American trope, which, like, I don't know if it's offensive or not. I think that there is some problematic shit there. But I also think this is something we see a lot in Westerns, right? I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't know if I can really add anything intelligent to that. Other than to say that, like, verbal storytelling is kind of how history is passed down. And that is a thing with a lot of indigenous cultures you'll hear about, is like, you know, stories passed down from time and time again.
Yes.
So I guess that feels fairly realistic, I guess. It is them, you know. I did kind of have a thought of like, wait, this guy's just going to tell the story of some family, but you know what? It is his family. Like,
yes,
they are a family, the whole bunch of them. So I think it works just generally. Yeah,
I mean, there was nothing glaringly offensive about it, and it was a big family. So he's okay. So Aidan Quinn plays Alfred, the oldest boy. Brad Pitt plays Brad Pitt. Basically, he's playing Tristan, and Henry Thomas, little E.T. boy, is playing Samuel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. He's all grown up, kind of. He still looks like he's about 15, but
yeah.
And Anthony Hopkins is Anthony Hopkins. I think he's at like sort of peak Anthony Hopkins here. I always feel like he kind of plays himself, but like we did Dracula a little while ago, and I feel like there wasn't much difference between Van Helsing and the father. There were nuances, but it's still very much Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I guess like both him and Brad Pitt kind of have that going on where, like, I mean, yeah. I think Anthony Hopkins, his Anthony Hopkins-ness just totally lends itself to a role like this. His accent maybe goes a couple different directions from time to time. Like at one point he sounded very Irish, but then at other points he just sounds like English. But I like him as I liked his character because he's like the sort of, I don't know, traditional frontier father, but he's very, I don't know, there's a lot of warmth there with him. Like he's got principles that he doesn't want to budge from, and you know, he will cut you out if you if you cross him, but at the same time, there is warmth and love for his family there that comes across. And as the movie progresses, his character goes through changes that, make him a more difficult performance, I guess, for Anthony Hopkins, and also just the sort of how you see that character, change throughout the movie from being like the strong father figure to kind of just struggling to get by, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. Like, especially the second half of this was pretty remarkable. And I don't know, I like how sort of wholesome this story is. Like, even they have shots of them like hanging out after dinner and they're like playing a little tune on the piano and singing. And
the first 15 minutes are incredibly idyllic, and he even has a line like, so mom leaves because she can't hack the Montana winters, I guess. Can't say I blame her. And he's writing to her and he says like, having the sons all together with me fills me with quiet satisfaction. And yeah, they're in the living room singing a song together, which is like, feels so foreign from today's culture, at least as I understand it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you just know really things are going to go bad.
Exactly. They really set it up like this is a really beautiful, loving family union. Even though they say pretty early on, Tristan is father's favorite. He's this wild child. We see him like he's really embracing the Native American culture as well. And it's almost like his second father. Oh gosh, now I can't remember his name.
One Stab.
What's One Stab? That it's almost like his adopted father in a way, because he's there as well as a couple. So later on, these like the sheriff comes by and is like, "Have you seen this man?" I was wondering, is this man they're looking for the man that is married to the Native American woman who is also living with this family?
I think so. When I first saw the movie, that scene kind of just sort of like I forgot about it by the end of the movie, because they're like, they show up and they're like, we're looking for this guy, and they show a picture, and then they're like, we don't know. He came by a couple years ago, and he said he was off to various places in the world.
Right.
Then when I watched it again, I was like, wait a minute. I remember this scene. What is this about? Like, why are they showing this? What is the purpose of this? And then I looked at the picture. The picture definitely looks like the guy. And later on, there's another scene where I think it's when the politicians show up with Alfred in a bunch of vehicles. Like, he kind of pulls his hat down over his head and immediately kind of exits the area. So I think that is what's happening there.
Yeah. So they're kind of living a little bit off the grid. They're kind of like they're rebellious. They have befriended the Native Americans, which obviously at this time and in many ways today is contentious. So this is a very like loving, safe sort of place. And then the brothers, first of all, a real fucking bear. I don't know how, I didn't even look into this because I was scared I would find information about animal cruelty. That was a real fucking bear in this movie.
That's wild.
There were no tricks or anything.
The bear scene at the end, was that also a real bear? The like final scene? Spoiler?
That did not look not real to me.
Okay, because they did some weird camera work there that made me wonder, like, is there a guy in a suit here and everything is blurry to maybe disguise that fact?
Maybe.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
So, like, they establish at the beginning that Tristan is like, he's the favorite and he's like wild at heart. He has the bear in his heart, and he sneaks up to a bear and like touches it, and the bear gets pissed, and then the bear attacks him, and then
the bear's name is Bart. The bear's name is Bart. Let's call him by his name.
Wait, is this like a famous bear? Is this
yes, yeah.
This is the bear that's in that other movie with Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin. Yes,
he worked twice with Anthony Hopkins.
Oh wow,
Bart
that's hilarious.
the Bear. Legends of the Fallen: The Edge with Anthony Hopkins.
Okay.
He was also in White Fang. This is a quite accomplished bear. He has quite the prolific film career.
Quite the IMDb
R.I.P.
page.
Died in 2000.
Pour one out for Bart.
Anyway.
I felt bad though because Tristan cuts the bear's claw off and keeps it with him for the rest of the movie, but I'm just like, man, that bear was just sleeping. and then some kid pokes him,
Yeah.
and he's defending his little bear kids or whatever, and then he loses a finger for it. So I did not like Tristan at that point. I was like, I don't know about that.
I agree with you. He grew on me, but I agree. So, okay, we were all set up, all these boys. Mommy Dearest has gone off. This is like the perfect recipe for mommy issues. Youngest boy goes to school, perhaps? He's gone away for a bit.
Yeah, I got the impression he was off to the city, living the city life, and that's where he meets
Susanna, she shows up, and here we go.
Everything turns to shit.
Yeah. She gets off that train, and everyone immediately falls in love with her.
Jaws hitting the floor and eyeballs popping out.
Oh my God. And Samuel's like, she's great. This poor little boy. And so they're engaged. And she starts hanging out at the house. Everyone loves her. She's got serious goo-goo eyes for Tristan, though.
Well, I mean, you saw the way they were like, this really is a Brad Pitt drool vehicle, because he just shows up. He's just like, it's 90s Brad Pitt. He's got the long hair. He's on the horse. Like, every time he shows up, there's like 8 horses behind him, and he's just like, there's the scene where she's like in her room and she looks out the window and he's like breaking in a horse, and she's like, just like all into him.
I know. There was a point, later on, where he comes back and she's staring out the window and she's literally like gnawing her fingers. As soon as he shows up, she just puts her hand in her mouth. So I don't know. We kind of see them hanging out for a bit, more wholesome, good fun.
But there's a little bit of tension there. And then there's also the tension. Like, okay, so the moment I knew kind of where things were going was like when they pick her up from the train and then they're in the car on the way back and kind of having conversation. And Samuel, within like 30 seconds of us getting to know this character, he's like, the goddamn Kaiser. Like, he's all worked up about World War I. So you're like, oh shit, yeah, this is, they're all dead.
Yeah. Yeah, he's really raring to go to war, and just sort of announces one day, he's like, I'm fucking doing it.
Yeah, didn't give her the heads up.
I know, she was like quite surprised in that scene. And then I guess the other boys were like, well, we gotta go take care of Samuel, I guess. So they all go off to war.
Yep, that was the plan.
I guess that's what you did when you were a young man and world wars were happening. So they're all upset. Dad's not happy about it. He doesn't want anyone off at war. Susanna is very distressed. Tristan starts comforting her. This was one of the most interesting scenes of the film for me, because all 3 brothers are like fully present in this scene, even though we don't see Samuel. So she's upset that Samuel is going. I think she really loves Samuel, genuinely. But it almost feels like a maternal thing rather than like a romantic or sexual thing. Oh, because before this, they're playing tennis or whatever. And Samuel comes up to Tristan and is like, she's sort of passionate. And Tristan's just like, are you a virgin? And he's like, oh. And Brad Pitt's just like, I recommend fucking. Are we using this word in that context at this point in history? I don't know, but it just seems like,
was it like a Deadwood anachronism? They didn't want to use a word like fucking periwinkled or something, whatever people would have said that period of time.
I recommend periwinkling.
I'm pretty sure that was the slang. Okay, that is
quite shocked me.
That's a scene where Brad Pitt is like, okay, I think Brad Pitt totally works in this movie. I think he's a good actor. I like him. So like no real problems with Brad Pitt here, except that he kind of like gets so close to the line of not working a few times where just because like he really is just Brad Pitt in this movie. Like he has like multiple vocalizations, like, when he cries or screams and stuff like that I've heard him in other movies sound exactly like that. So yeah, that was definitely a Brad Pitt moment where I'm like, this is Brad Pitt in Ocean's 11 right here.
I also feel like Brad Pitt has such a distinct voice. I don't know. It's like he talks from the back of his throat or something. He doesn't change it at all in any movie. I also love Brad Pitt. I actually think he's really underrated as an actor. I think for a long time he was just like the hot guy to put in movies. But I do think he's very talented. I think he's really funny too. I think he has really great timing. But yeah, this was just like hot 90s Brad Pitt with like his grunge hair.
Brad Pitt with hair and horses.
Yeah. So anyway, all this tension is building up. They're going to go off to war. Susanna is like weeping in a room and Brad Pitt comes in, or vice versa. I don't even know. Someone's in a room, someone comes in. And then they get very close and he's comforting her. And then it turns sort of romantic and there's all this chemistry and they're like, are they going to kiss? But older brother Alfred, the killjoy, kind of walks by and gives them a for shame kind of look and then walks off and they're like, oh, better we not. And so they part. But this one moment, I think sort of like encapsulates the whole movie.
Yeah.
And there's so much tension in it. It was so interesting to me. And I think so complicated and the relationship with the brothers within like between each other and also with her. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because it almost seems like Samuel's not in the room at that scene, but maybe I just have psychic abilities, but I felt like I sort of knew that Samuel was going to be the one who died because he's the one she's engaged to. That way we have this love triangle situation. But he's gone, and then it's between the two of them, and like with her and Tristan, it's just like raw passion. You know, that seems to be like it makes her brain go funky, and she starts not thinking rationally. Whereas Alfred is like, he's very like, do the right thing. You know, I'm gonna call you out if you don't. So yeah, it does kind of like really set up where things are going and what the movie is about.
Yeah. And really also sets up the relationship between Tristan and Alfred to become much more tense, because up until this point, they've really been quite close, all the brothers, even though they're very different and they kind of make fun of each other a bit and maybe become frustrated with each other, but there's so much love there and they're so bonded. But this really puts a wrench in it all. And
what an awkward thing to have right before you go off to war. Like, oh, geez. All right, well, we'll just, I don't know, we'll address this in 3 years if we get back alive.
Well, I mean, they don't need to wait 3 years because somehow these three brothers end up in the same trench in the same battlefield together during the First World War. I'm okay. I don't know as much about the First World War as I do about the Second, which isn't even saying that much. I think it's highly doubtful that three brothers would end up in the exact same place on the exact same battlefield in the exact same trench. I mean, would this happen?
I don't know enough about how the military works or worked in the past to answer that. It does feel a little perhaps far-fetched. It does kind of weirdly make the war feel small.
Yeah,
because it's clear that like Tristan and Sam are attached at the hip in the war. They go into the trench fight together, and then afterward, like Tristan's job is just to like literally he's just babysitting him throughout the war.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, again, what they set up in the beginning, the opening narration where they explain the three kids and they're like, Alfred's the older brother. He's the responsible one. Tristan's crazy. And then Samuel's a dumb child, you know, like that sort of persists to adulthood. Yeah. That felt, I guess, a little bit weird. But overall, I will say this part of the movie was very well done. I mean, this is probably, I bet a lot of budget went into this part, especially for extras.
Yeah.
It's a very, I don't know. I can't speak to accuracy. I don't know enough about war history, but it feels like a accurate presentation of World War I and like trench warfare where they're like, okay, you're all just going to run into the middle and most of you will die. And the way they depict that is very gruesome and upsetting. And then the later scene, like the next day or whenever, when Samuel gets killed and he's caught in the wire and there's all the mustard gas and stuff like that. Like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Brutal.
That was brutal because his poor little baby goes blind from the mustard gas. And when he gets caught in that fence, in the wire, I couldn't. I will say this, Brad Pitt's like devastated wails for his brother just broke me down big time. I lost it at this point.
This might be the most melodramatic part, if only because of like kind of just how much it escalates. Like they're both screaming each other's names, looking for each other. You know, you're cutting back and forth between Sam, who's like blind and he's stumbling into things, and Brad Pitt's like running around looking and stuff like that. And then like he gets caught in the wire and he just can't get out. And then there's two Germans with a machine gun and they're like setting up the machine gun, and you're like, oh fuck. And then then it turns into fucking RoboCop for like 15 seconds while they're like and they just like light him up.
I don't understand why they spent so much time and so many bullets on one little blind baby bird caught in this wire. Like, is that realistic? Would you not have just like run up to him and like given him one in the neck, like with a knife? Like, he's dead anyway.
This is the melodrama.
All right, so R.I.P.
So he dies,
Samuel.
and he cuts his heart out right there, which I was like, what is going on?
Oh, Brad Pitt, right? Because at the beginning, when they were like, oh, the warrior takes the heart of his kill, and that releases its spirit, and its spirit is free, right? So yeah, he's just like, well, fucking, I guess I got to cut my brother's heart out on this battlefield
and send it home.
He's committed.
And then he, basically, the beginnings of PTSD are starting, and he just goes sicko mode and is sneaking over and killing Germans and taking their scalps, which is kind of funny. Didn't realize Brad Pitt taking German scalps was a thing that happened in 2 movies.
Oh, yeah.
Not to equate the Germany of World War I with the Germany of World War II. A very complicated thing there, but that is a weirdly specific detail where I was like, wait a minute.
That's true. You know, when you can play it, the people will just come for you. So yeah, Tristan's cutting off scalps, but Alfred goes home with a cane because he's been injured. And this is like the beginning of the devastating Alfred pursuing Susanna situation. Like, he's obviously like obsessed with her from the moment he sees her. But oh my God, when they are on the hill in front of Samuel's grave and he's like making his case for why he could make her happy and like marry him. And you're just like, oh fuck, dude, he's such a good man. Like, he really... I remember being younger and actually like thinking he was kind of a jerk, but he's really not.
Alfred was right about everything.
Yeah, he was. He was like super responsible, and Susanna just like, she's too horny for Tristan. She just can't even think about it. She can't consider it.
Yeah, there is a weird line or a bit of dialogue between them. She says, I can only cause you pain. And then Alfred says, why don't you let me be the judge of that? Which I thought was kind of interesting because I guess she does cause Alfred pain throughout the movie as he's like longing for her and stuff like that. But really, you know, I can only cause you pain feels like a much more accurate description of the Tristan Susanna relationship. So I thought it was interesting that was what she was saying to Alfred.
Yeah, lots of unrequited love happening.
Could you learn to love me? Which is a good line. Try that one out on Tinder.
So Tristan finally comes back. Okay, this is the second time I lost my mind, when he's sitting at the grave and he just is like fucking going hard on this scene. Sometimes you watch actors and you're like I've been on set before, just like as an extra, where they're like puffing the water in actors' eyes to make them cry. And like, fair enough. It's hard. It's hard to get to that place. Not everyone has that ability. But I don't think anyone was puffing any shit into Brad Pitt's eyes. He is like full on in this scene. That was devastating. Like, that's how you cry when you lose someone. And I liked that. Okay, this is another reason why I like this movie. This was a different time, but it was also, these men are seen as incredibly, incredibly vulnerable through the whole movie. And I think that, I mean, not, you know, blah, 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 whatever. It isn't something you see on screen a lot. And I get it. It's a romance. This is maybe more targeted toward women who maybe want to see that as well. But it was kind of nice to see these men just being completely just raw with their emotions. It was really captivating, I think.
Yeah, there's it's interesting. I think that is like part of what puts it into the chick flick category, but that is, I think, like what makes this movie good in a lot of ways is like I really, really, really like Alfred as a character, and the actor, what's his name? Aidan Quinn. I'm not familiar with him. I don't know if I've seen him in like anything else, but
I bet you've seen him in a million things, but like you don't know. You know what I mean? Like he was never like a huge movie star.
I really liked him in this. Like I liked his performance a lot because he really is like expressive with his emotions. From like, you know, when he's like trying to ask Susanna out and he's like, you know, we could have a nice life together, and like it feels very like genuine, you know, and you're kind of like, you're almost cringing a little bit at how awkward it is, but but then later on, like when Tristan and Susanna are like dating and, you know, doing their thing, he has this whole conversation with Tristan, and he's just like, you fucker. Like he's in his face because he's like, you are gonna fuck her up. Like you're not gonna do this right. And he says like, you know, oh, do you want me to marry her and make an honest woman out of her? And he just is like, yes, like he just screams it at him.
You know what? Just move past it. Tell the story, please.
She's still expecting a call.
Okay. That's not gonna happen. So just move past it. All right.
You will call her!
Jesus, man. I'm sorry. Fine. I'll call her.
And so like the emotionality of that, as well as like later on when fucking people are dying and stuff like that, like he is sad and crying and in a believable way. And I guess the other exchange is after Tristan has left and he comes back for a little while and he's talking to his dad or whatever, he talks to Susanna outside when she's got the letter from Tristan saying like it's over. And, you know, he's breaking down about like, you know, I loved her and I still love her and all that stuff. And like, that is a very, it's like vulnerability, honesty, that women go crazy for.
We love it. I really, really, I think for me, this was the most, I think everyone does a really wonderful job in this, but I really think he is so good in this movie. Like his, even just his eyes, I don't know. They're just like, they make my heart break. He's so good in this. And I think his character could have been played very one note, like I'm the rule following older brother, blah, blah, blah. He's so complicated, and those moments, like you said, like he has these huge moments, but he also has these moments where you can tell this character wants to just explode, and he's so restraining all of that. I think he does I think he has the most complicated role in this film, and I think he does it brilliantly.
Yeah, he was my favorite performance in the movie. I was really impressed and sort of like surprised at how much I like this character and this actor by the end of it.
Oh yeah, by the end you're like, fuck, like this guy needs a win. Just fucking please.
Taking a lot of L's.
Yeah, I think because Tristan comes back from the war and then him and Susanna just immediately are like, blah. That was them glomming onto one another. That was what that sound was. They finally get naked together, what she has been hoping and dreaming for years now.
And then he just kind of starts to go all distant. Like, it seems to start with the really upsetting scene where the cow is stuck in the barbed wire fence. That was a real bummer. He's clearly like having flashbacks to, I don't know if they actually cut it against footage from the war part. I hope they did. No. I hope they didn't, but like that would be the hack choice, would be to be like, hey, yes. But like clearly you're reminded of that. And then like, and basically this is where I start to feel really, really, really bad for Susanna, and she becomes like an incredibly sympathetic character. I like her character throughout the movie. Like, at no point did I dislike her or really think anything negative about her. But really, once things get going with Tristan, it's just it's all downhill for her. And like she's telling him, like, she's in love with him so much, and I want to have kids, and if we have a boy, we're going to name it after your brother. And he's just like PTSD, staring off into space, not paying attention. And as things go on, like there's a moment where they're in bed and he wakes up and is freaked out and has a knife like pointed at her, and then he just says, fuck it, I'm out of here. I'm going to be gone for a couple months, which turns out to be a couple years. And poor Savannah is just like waiting the whole time, and it's sad. Yeah. And he's like just having threesomes in Asia and just like bartering for bracelets in New Guinea. He's got like elephant tusks. He's in the ivory business. I think he's there's a really quick shot where they're on a boat and there's like two people like holding him down as he's like freaking out in bed. Is he supposed to be going through like opium withdrawals because they showed him smoking from that pipe earlier? I think so. Like, it's very sex, drugs, and rock and roll for him for a few years. Yeah. And like, okay, he's trying to escape his own mind. Before they leave, before he leaves, they have this exchange where he's like, it was like he was going to leave without even saying anything, and she catches him right before he goes, and she says like, if we had a child, if I were pregnant, would you still go? And he says yes. But then she says, I'll wait for you forever. And then he just kind of like does a little nod. That's it. And it's like, buddy, like this is the point where I really don't like Tristan, this whole chunk of the movie, because it's like, he could have just been like, no, you know what? This is not for me. He just leaves her in the lurch, doesn't give her, takes some fucking years to write a letter being like, all right, it's over. He doesn't just say it's over. He's like, I am dead. All we had is dead, as I am dead. Marry another. So she fucking does. Again, if you're in a rough Tinder conversation, good way to exit that. Marry another. Yeah. So she fucking marries Alfred. I actually hate this because I feel bad for both of them. Yeah, their relationship, I don't know. Like, we don't get to see a ton about their relationship. Yeah. Other than like, well, okay, yeah. So Alfred shows up at the house first because he's going to run for Congress, and this is when his dad is like, "Fuck off!" Like, he's not happy about it. I love that scene a lot. Just because I really like, one thing I really appreciated about the Ludlow character is he has a consistent sort of set of values when it comes to the government and politics and stuff like that. Like, he's very cynical about that, and they're talking about like he's going to run for Congress, and they're like, so what do you gentlemen hope to get out of this? What do you want for yourselves should my son be elected? And he's like, you didn't ask these questions, Alfred. And I think like I think this is an interesting thing about the Alfred character is like, I don't think he has asked those questions. I don't get because he's like, well, I'm going to go to Congress and I'm going to bring wisdom and humanity to Congress. And it's like, oh, buddy, like that is not how politics works. Yeah. And then Alfred has so many daddy issues though. Does he? Oh, what? I think so. He knows his dad loves Tristan more. I think this is trying to prove himself to Pops. And all these old men that look like daddy are like, go get it, kid. And like you said, his dad knows these men want to manipulate Alfred or want him in this position of power for their own gains. But Alfred's like, I think maybe a little short-sighted on that because he's like,
getting the validation his father never gave him.
Interesting. Okay. I definitely get the feeling that Alfred is like naive about politics. But I didn't quite pick up on that, but that could be there. I mean, I know at the end of the movie, him and Tristan have an exchange and he's like, I followed all the rules, man's, gods, and you followed none of them, and they all loved you more. Samuel, father, even my own wife. So
oh, fuck.
Maybe that is the context through which I should look at that scene.
I fucking lost it again at that point. That was another time that I cried. I think I cried 6 times. Yeah. That scene is brutal. I feel so bad for Alfred. I think this might be the most shit on character in maybe any movie ever.
Alfred?
Yeah. And it's also covert as well. Like nobody's just like straight up torturing him, like, you know. But I think he's just experiencing all of these consistent and persistent losses and tragedies in his life. And oh my God, I just wanted to give Alfred a big hug. I'd marry Alfred.
I mean, at that point in the
Alfred.
movie, certainly, because like we've had a fair amount of death and suffering. But I actually thought like he seemed to do pretty well for himself. Like he leaves to go to the city and he like starts some kind of business, and that's successful, and he gets elected and he's, you know, doing the politician thing. He gets involved. So all those like Irish gangsters, like he got involved with them. Like that was kind of his perhaps doing. And then he also votes in favor of prohibition, which is like
Boo.
good news for those gangs, which his dad basically disowns them for, which is pretty funny. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, so
go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, this is kind of around the time Daddy has a stroke, right?
Yeah, so he goes off to go be in government, and kind of like they have a big fight, him and his dad, and talking to Savannah. And then Tristan comes back. Of course, rides in on a horse with a bunch of horses behind him. Big, crazy scene.
A fucking like whole, I don't know what you call a big shitload of horses, like a fucking herd of this. To me, this was the most melodramatic. I actually laughed out loud watching this because the music is just like swelling and it's so over the top, and like it's over the mountains, and like it doesn't one stab he's like, I hear something. It's like horse hooves, and here comes Tristan with his fucking. Okay, I don't know how this guy didn't cut his hair through the First World War, through all of his travels, and he's still got this long hair. I also don't think that's realistic, but again, we're 90s Brad Pitt.
The Brad Pitt exception, yeah.
Yeah, that moment made me laugh out loud, actually, because it was so over the top. But also, I loved it.
Yeah, and then it immediately becomes a huge bummer because you meet Ludlow and you find out he's had a stroke, and this was a moment where I like totally like teared up, because this is like a call your family moment for me, of like, oh man, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, when he wrote "am happy" on his little chalkboard.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
I also cried at that point.
So then Tristan goes and visits Susanna in the city, and she's just like fucking destroyed.
Yeah. She plays it pretty cool, considering she keeps it together.
She just looks really sad for the rest of the movie, basically.
Yeah.
And this is like life is now cruel to her, because Tristan comes back and he's a changed man, because Isabel too is grown up, and I don't know if it was because of his like journey in the wilderness, or maybe just she changes him, but he's like a different person now. They say the bear is quiet. The bear inside him was sleeping. So he's like, yeah. I want to have a family. I want to have kids. And like they do all the stuff that she was like, as he was sitting there staring off into space, she's like, we're going to have a kid and name it Samuel. And just like, now that is happening with her. I mean, she even says, like, when she's talking to Alfred about it, oh yeah, and she hears the news that Tristan is marrying Isabel in like the worst kind of way. Details sometimes emerge in conversations where like Alfred is like, oh yeah, can you believe it? The news, you've heard the news, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, oh, she's marrying Isabel, blah, or he's marrying Isabel. And she's like, oh, again, you just see her get fucking crushed. It's like that scene from The Simpsons where like they show the freeze frame of Ralph Wiggum's heart getting broken.
I don't know it.
Okay, I'll show you that later. Yeah, and then she even says like, I can't remember what Alfred says, but she says like, well, I'm not Isabel too. And just like, that's it. That's her whole world right there is that fact. And just kind of it's that for the rest of the movie. And like, you get the impression that they wanted to have kids, but they couldn't for some reason. Like there was...
Alfred and Susanna.
Yeah. She says a line, like she writes a letter after the wedding between Susanna and Tristan, which is like the voiceover is the most like fucking bummed out sounding you could be.
It was, I don't know. I found it quite passive aggressive because she was taking little stabs at him. Like she's like, your father must be pleased. She is like a daughter to him, named after your own mother. Like he was raised alongside this girl. They do allude to the fact that she's almost like a sister, because that's how the conversation goes as well with Alfred. He's like, it's absurd. What is she, 19? She's like a sister to him. And that's when Susanna starts saying like, oh, she's 20. Susanna must be in her 30s by now. An old maid, withered, crusty old thing.
Yeah, I'm not clear on how old the older characters are. Like, how old do you think Brad Pitt is at this point? He's got to be in his 30s, right? At
this point, he has to be in his 30s at this point. At least. Well, yeah, he has to be in his 30s. Because if you think about how old were they when they went off to war, at least in his 30s, mid-30s. They don't age them at all. Because at this point, we're already well into the 1920s. Because we go up until 1963 here. And we start really digging in like 1912 or something.
Right. Yeah. So basically, like, we get some World War II, and then we know about 5 years-ish went by. Well, I don't know if the boys came home when the war was just done, or... No, Brad Pitt got discharged. They said he got discharged, and then Alfred's leg was fucked up. So I don't know exactly when they came back. I don't know. I don't think they're like 35. I would guess that Brad Pitt's supposed to be like 29.
29 only. Well, maybe. I don't know. I'm not great with age. We
get a really awkward kind of family reunion scene in the city. That was painful to watch.
Oh, fuck. I also cried at this point when Susanna approaches fucking little boy Samuel and talks about knowing his uncle.
I felt so bad for her in that scene. And
brutal.
But at the same time, the brothers basically like totally reconnect. Like you can tell they're just like really happy to see each other, and kind of whatever was in the past, they're like, fuck it. Like, we're Tristan's a different man. Yeah, so I guess that is also like
he's no longer a threat to his relationship with his wife.
I guess that's true. Yeah, that's pretty nailed down. But I think that's like part of what makes the scene just also so. I just feel so fucking bad for Susanna in the rest of this movie. Like she's such a tragic, just like seeing the man you love with his family that could have been your family, and you tried everything to make that happen, and he just kind of like pushed you away, to then see him go, I'm a different guy now, and now I actually love all these things. And meanwhile, she's in this marriage that I don't know how rock and roll their marriage is, but like he's a fucking politician and he has to run off and give a speech and like all that shit. Like that sucks. But then you're also seeing like this really heartwarming moment of the brothers reconnecting, and just how would you feel being her in that situation where you're like, just all of this fucking sucks for me, but it's kind of like awesome for everyone else.
And she's also like lived with Isabel too for so long, and was a bit of like a sister or like a friend to her. Like she says she loves Isabel too, and I believe that she does. She's such a pathetic character, and I don't mean that in like you're pathetic. She's just desperate and pathetic for so much of this movie. I didn't even, and when I first watched this, like when I was younger and even the last time I watched it, I didn't pick up on how blatant she is about how she feels about Tristan. Like, she is not hiding it for a second from anyone.
Biting her lip the whole time.
Well, because in that moment, Alfred has to go off and give a speech, and he grabs Susanna, and she just like fully, her head like exorcist style, just like turns completely around to look at Tristan when she's leaving. Like, it's brutal. And then Tristan leaves, and his fucking wife gets shot by the Irish gangsters on their way home.
That was sad. I was not expecting that at all. I did not expect that.
I obviously knew that was coming, but that's such a vivid image for me, that shot of her just sitting lifeless in the car, and the wailing starts of her mother. Oh my God. Brutal. Like, so devastating.
Yeah. They have a funeral. Ludlow, the dad, is like still not even talking to Alfred because like he blames the whole incident on the government, which like kind of makes some sense. And fucking Alfred, like, I guess this is Alfred as a character seems like Mr. like super integrity, you know what I mean? Like, he seems like he's an honest guy who cares about the people around him and them being treated right and all that kind of stuff. And they don't really get too much into his political career, other than, he got involved in politics, which is like, well, it kind of makes him inherently, you're in the belly of the beast now. But like he is involved with like the O'Bannon brothers, who are the Irish gangsters. And he's the one who has to tell Tristan, he's like, yeah, so you kind of can't really do anything here. It was a terrible, tragic accident. And you beat up a cop, and you need to go to jail for 30 days. And he says, like, what about the cop that killed my wife? And he's like, he's been reprimanded. So like, it's interesting that Alfred he's the one who has to kind of deliver this news and sort of almost like be a little bit of an agent of the state in this moment. But you can kind of understand like why the dad hates him so much, because like those are just the two values are in very big conflict there.
I find this really interesting. This is definitely like a coming of age story, I think, for all three brothers. Like, the father who he literally put them in the middle of nowhere in the Montana mountains to presumably save them from the life that he was living, that may be seen as very righteous or moral, but really wasn't. And then this son of his went hoping for his father's love and blessing, because he's essentially following in his father's footsteps. And he's just like, you're a fucking massive disappointment. Where these boys are really, they're very naive. And it just, all this tragedy happens around them a little bit because maybe they are a little naive. They're a little idealistic about what the world is. And they're not... These aren't city boys. These are boys who've been raised in the wilderness. And Tristan maybe fares a little better in ways because he's a little bit wild, and he maybe suits that environment a little bit more, or embraces that a little bit more. But I think it's a really interesting look at how this father really like tried to shelter his boys almost. But you can't stop that, obviously. Like, the world will... get at you however it's going to get at you. And I think that's, for me, like the real tragedy of this father, and watching him unable to really save his boys or give his boys what he wanted for them. And all this like internalized guilt probably that's just like festering inside his stroked body. Ugh.
Yeah. There's a whole thing about like parents of one sort of generation having kids of a different generation, and they sort of like contrast and create their opposite, I guess. So like hippie parents had conservative kids, or vice versa. And I think in this case, it is kind of funny because that sort of seems like what happened with those two, just in that Anthony Hopkins' character is like, he was in the army, and he says the policy at the time was Indians, and gruesome things that happened that he took part in. He's built he just has a very jaded view of government, and I guess, what it can do, what it's for. Whereas his son is like, hey, Pops, these are my friends from the city and they want me to run for Congress. They like me. They think I'm a good guy with a good heart. And he's just like, you idiot, you stupid child. You do not understand anything.
Yeah. I think, it's so much a case of circumstance. With Susanna as well. There are moments in this where I loathe her, but I really don't. Like, I'm mad at myself for that because she's really a product of circumstance in so many ways. Like, when you look at she didn't really have parents. Like they said she lost her parents quite early, and she's a little bit naive as well about the world. And then she's just stuck on this farm with these three men that are just like obsessed with her. Seems like a dream, but when you look at Isabel 2 versus Susanna, like would Susanna really? I don't like something that's interesting to me is like, is it because Tristan has changed, or is it because of or Susanna and Isabel 2 are that really made Tristan like that thing of I'm not Isabel 2? Well, maybe that was the problem from the beginning. Yeah. Like maybe those two, maybe there is that incredibly intense passion and chemistry between them, but is that... So, okay, I keep going back to that very last line, which it was a good death. But was he living a good life? And what is a good life? And did Susanna have a chance at an actual good life with Alfred? And you're right, we didn't really see their relationship before Tristan returned. So maybe she was maybe she was like, you know what, I'm content and I'm happy. But it wasn't wild and passionate. But maybe it shouldn't be. And I think sometimes two people have something between them, and that just happens for whatever reason. Maybe that's not healthy, even though it feels good in that moment, but it's sort of always going to be, difficult. But then Isabel 2, maybe she's allowed, okay. They call her a half-breed, like her mother is native, her father's white. She doesn't have as many opportunities, but in a way that almost seems like it affords her some more freedoms of not having certain expectations placed on her. In fact, they talk about expectations of her, like, why does she need an education? Like, it's not going to ever allow for anything for her because she is her mother's native. So it's like, maybe she's allowed to be a bit more free with who she is and live that life a little bit more freely than Susanna could let up. I don't know. I don't know if we're given the information to make that determination. Just because we don't really see a ton of Isabel 2 until later in the movie as an adult. So we don't we see a lot of like scenes of them in love and, they're starting their family and stuff like that. But like, I didn't really have a good sense of who that person was. My interpretation was that it was more of a timing thing, that it seemed like he was the right guy for her at the time, but he also just was not, like, his head was in the wrong place, and I think that the bear thing they talk about, that the bear is awake or asleep inside of him. Yeah. It seemed like for some reason after enough time, he changed, his priorities changed, how he looks at things change. So I guess the question is, like, if you took that mindset, Brad Pitt, and you combined it with her years earlier, would it have lined up then? Right. And if the answer is yes, that's what I think makes this so tragic. Like, I really do think it's tragic for Susanna, because from her perspective, like, that might be how she's feeling, like, she's like, I'm not Isabel 2, but that may not necessarily mean, like, in the ontological sense of we are different beings, but just like right now he's with Isabel 2 because that's how things worked out, like, he came back, I'm married to you, that's the way the cookie crumbles. So that was my sort of understanding of things, was I felt it was more based on him and his life experiences and kind of where he was at in that moment. And that she just kind of like missed a window, which I think makes it so sad and makes her super sympathetic. Yeah, well, and she also does say to him, you know, forever turned out to be too long. Like, she made the choice to marry Alfred. She stopped waiting for him. I mean, in fairness, he was like, fuck off. We're not getting married. But even when he first comes back, she's not the first person he asks for. And they're like, by the way, he's like, I've got some shit for her. And they're like, oh, she actually married your brother.
Yeah.
And then, so I don't know. I don't know. I think the sort of ambiguity of that is interesting because she does go visit him when he's in the jail cell. This is another point that I cried. It is intense. Just the two of them talking to each other is like so emotionally wrought. Like, I was just like, holy fuck. And they're both crying. And she says, like, I wanted her to die. And I think I wanted Samuel to die. And it's just like it's like she's at confession with him in this moment. So I think this is the last time they see each other, right? Do you think this is like a goodbye for her?
A goodbye as in like she knew what she was planning on doing? That's a good point. Yeah, it kind of is, I guess, because so the way they show what happens next is it's kind of like cross-cutting between two different events, but I don't know if they necessarily happen at the same time or really have anything to do with each other. But Tristan goes on his revenge murder spree, killing the Irish gangsters, and then we see Susanna in the house where Alfred's doing congressman-y things, and it's a big social event, and she's obviously miserable.
It's like a party. Yeah,
probably some like fundraiser bullshit. She talks about how she tells Tristan she had to give a speech. She did not sound excited about that. And yeah, I think she just like she says her goodbye and is like, fuck it. She cuts her hair off and kills herself.
So tragic. I love that she cuts her hair off though in that moment. I think that really speaks to like her position and her level of just agency over her own life and maybe what she felt her options were to make what kind of decisions as a woman at this time or you know, she's sort of fawned over this whole time as being this great beauty, which I mean she is obviously, but how maybe that was ultimately pretty detrimental to her happiness. I love that moment. It was also interesting to me, and I don't know that this is what they were going for, but there is such a strong presence of like Native American culture in this, and I was like, I wonder if that there was significance in doing that as well, because in many First Nations cultures, there's a lot of significance to keeping your hair long and not cutting your hair as well.
I was kind of thinking of that too, although I was just thinking of how much scalping shows up in this movie. Like, if there was some kind of... No, I'm serious. If there was some kind of like weird metaphorical comparison there, because she's about to die and she's kind of like scalping herself in a sense. Because we do get the scene at the end after the big shootout where one stab is like kind of like miming scalping everybody on the ground, which was interesting. I don't know if I should find that funny, maybe not, but I thought it was an interesting detail that was kind of like his way of, I don't know, dealing with what happened there.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that moment. I hope that that's not an offensive moment, because I do think it was like quite in the context of the story, and the story they're telling was quite meaningful, and I think was a good moment. So yeah, pretty much everyone's dead. Okay, so then they bring Susanna's casket home on the train. There was a shot where the train door sort of slides open and Alfred's standing outside with this black hat on and her casket is visible. That was such a beautiful shot. I was like, whew, that looks pretty. But it's heartbreaking. She's dead. Then we get Alfred's horrible, heartbreaking speech at everyone's grave site. And then they come for Brad.
Yeah, they're there. We're not here
The
to arrest
Irish.
you. They're like, we're gonna kill you. And he's like, all right, let's do it in the woods. Don't do it in front of my kids. So he's ready to walk off. And then Dad shows up with a shotgun out of his jacket. Okay,
His giant, like, bearskin, like, humongoid coat.
Yeah, he just whips it out and then blam. And they do a lot of like kind of, this looked a little bit cheesy. Just the sort of like slow-mo frame rate dropping effect they did here that looked a little bit odd. I mean, I guess like the thing about guns in movies is that if you're actually going to show things like really photorealistically accurate in terms of like how long an event takes out, this whole scene would have taken like 2 seconds because it would have been like blap, blap, blap. And then that's it. So you got to kind of like, you do shit like that to sort of like make it more interesting and as a movie. But it did feel like it went on a little bit long with this.
This was an actual Chekhov's gun moment because we get like a very short scene earlier after he's had his stroke and he's like trying to load this shotgun. And he's like, and he's grumbling and trying to load the thing. And then
it's the shotgun Tristan gave him when he came back from his adventure.
Right. And it's sort of like, why are they showing us this? Just to show us, like, hammer home this point, like, now this father who was this great man is now suffering and has this impairment or this disability. It's so brief, but then it obviously comes back. Yet the classic Tristan jumping in front of him. No. And guess who saves the fucking day? It's our boyfriend, Alfred.
Who looks like he gets a total cool guy moment here because he's around the corner with his rifle and you're like, oh shit, yeah, Alfred. And then he like starts walking towards them and it's like a lever action rifle. So he goes like chick, chick, and cocks it and the fucking shell flies out. Yeah, he looks badass.
We're both so happy for Alfred. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do. I mean, it's kind of a cheesy ending as well. Like they do find some sort of resolution at the end, but it's
yeah, you
sweet.
get like a very clear reunion between father and son because Anthony Hopkins like walks up to him and he's sort of like struggling, kind of like he wants to say something, he's not sure, and then he's just like, fuck it, and he hugs him, and it's like clear reconciliation time in the movie. And then I think our
another bear scene.
Well, yeah, so Tristan's like, I'm gonna have to go on the run, I guess. I don't know if he's on the lam, but he's like, can you watch my kids? And then Alfred's like, it would be an honor to. So I guess Alfred kind of does, I guess, win out and that he gets some kids. Like that also is what makes it sort of tragic and sad, you know? Like Susanna would have like wanted those kids too. Like it's just like, I don't know. Everything's just kind of bittersweet, you know?
I think that's why I love a good tragedy. It's like, this is the ultimate, like, of tragedies outside of like a Shakespearean work.
Yeah.
This is so devastating for everybody.
Yeah, it is.
Except for Tristan. He's just like chilling, running through the woods for 40 years, I guess.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, you know, his wife died and he, I guess, hasn't seen his kids in those time. Like it's tragic for Tristan because he's sort of like, he goes on this journey of like, he was wild and he wanted to fuck bears up and he's a crazy guy and he ruins women in the process. But then, you know, he changes and he's like, wow, he's like, he really seems like he's matured and he's a father and he's in a great relationship and you're happy for him. And then it all just goes to shit. And then it ends up with him back in the woods fighting bears, you know, like.
But does he change? This is my thing. I think Tristan is a wild child. Maybe he appreciated those things and he thought he needed those things or he wanted those things. But I mean, he's still selling booze during the Prohibition times, and
the family.
I don't think Tristan can be tamed. Tristan cannot be tamed like the wild horses that he breaks.
I could change him. I could tame him. I think. Well, no, he was bootlegging because the family had gone into hard times. Like the price of cattle had dropped, I guess, and sounded like they were pretty devastated.
I don't think he's a bad guy.
He was just getting by.
I think he's a good man. He's just wild. I think he belongs in the bush.
I don't know. I really feel like he he was like turning into Family Man. Like he was going to kind of become his dad in a sense, you know, like that was sort of the trajectory he was on. And I think he kind of like the fact that he ended up in the woods again alone fighting bears, like, yeah, I guess that kind of is who he always was, but that didn't necessarily need to be how it ended. I think that is a little bit tragic too.
I think you're thinking like an Alfred, and I'm thinking like a Tristan. I think he belongs in the woods. You're being practical about this.
Yeah.
I like this romantic ending. This was his fate. He always knew he had that bear in his brain or whatever it is. Bert on the brain.
He had a date with Bear Destiny.
Yeah. And I mean, he clearly saw his father again or went back home at some point because he's wearing his father's coat. I mean, it could be another bear skin fur coat. It's the bear fur coat. But I like to think it's his father's. When he meets the bear, he meets Bart. He meets Bart the bear.
Don't call him Bert. He gets pissed.
He meets his end.
Okay, that last scene again looks terrible. It's sort of a bummer that this is the final thing you see in the movie. Like conceptually, I guess it's fine. It's a fight with the bear. Mm-hmm. I guess if this is a real bear, it looks like it would have been crazy to film because it's a human actor. Sure looks like he's getting fucked up by a bear. So well done in that sense. But they use this effect where they're like, take half the frames out, make everything blurry. And I'm just like, what is this? Why is this like this?
Maybe there was some like safety apparatus on them that was too obvious in the shot or something. Yeah,
I kind of am wondering if that was perhaps a bit of a cover-up effect where they're like, what if we make it blurry? This will work. It's the end of the movie. People got to go to the bathroom by now anyway.
Yeah, it's long, but I didn't feel... Okay, so I know you're a strict 90-minute guy. How did you feel about this runtime?
It was long. I mean, I'm always going to be impatient at a 2-hour movie. I don't care how fucking good the movie is or how excited I am about it. Like, I don't like long movies. I think it used its time about as wisely as you could. I don't think there was really anything... Didn't really feel like it dragged on. Like, it actually felt like whatever was happening made sense and was all kind of moving in a coherent direction. So, yeah, a little bit long, but uses the time as wisely as one could hope for.
Yeah. So overall, positive review?
Yeah, overall it was pretty good. It's like I said, it's a movie about characters and the things that happen to them and their relationships to each other, and I think it does those things exceedingly well. Like the fight scene between Brad Pitt and Alfred, or the scene later on where it's Alfred talking to Susanna, and then Dad comes out, and like that's the fight right before he has a stroke. Like those scenes are like fantastic. Like those are that's the kind of stuff that makes the movie. So I think it does that stuff very well, and I really enjoyed that. Otherwise, I don't know. It's a nice looking movie because of where they filmed it. It definitely like it's if you like horses and you like being outside, this is the movie for you. Again, this is another reason why I would see this kind of thing as a kid and be like, oh my God, like it's just it's horses running around in the grass. Who cares? So I think it does look nice in that sense. You get these nice, visuals of the mountains and stuff like that. It isn't very interesting the way it's filmed. Like it actually feels very, there's very few shots in this movie that I'm like, oh wow, like nothing really stands out. It's just like the camera is where the camera needs to be for that scene, and that's about it. It's almost like watching a stage play at a lot of times. It's got a soundtrack. I like the music in the soundtrack. I think it's pretty good. It's a little overwhelming at times. It's just like, yo, here's the soundtrack. Like, one of the main melodies sounds like it's going to turn into Amazing Grace or the theme from The West Wing. Those are the two which came later, I guess. So maybe that's where that copyright infringement goes. But the soundtrack was just a little bit much from time to time. Like the scene after Tristan and Isabel, like when they have kids and stuff like that, they kind of show you some elapsed time with some music playing, and it's just like da na 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 na, like it's really really intense at that point. But yeah, overall good movie. I enjoyed it. I would consider watching another movie by whoever made this one. I don't remember their name.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either. I think you make an interesting point about like the camera angles and sort of how it's shot. I feel like there's all kinds of filmmakers, but there are those filmmakers who like you see their work and you see what they've done, like Aronofsky. Like you see what he's doing. He's like, look what I can do, right? It's like a lot of tricks and a lot of cool stuff, and it lends itself to the film, but it almost sometimes can be distracting with the wrong story, I think. Like something like Requiem for a Dream. Obviously that works beautifully with something like that. But yeah, then there are those directors who kind of, as a performer, I appreciate sometimes, where it's like you could see, and I think that's why sometimes these movies really work for me, because if I'm not into the performances, I don't like it. And it could be really stylized and stuff too, and still really, really work for me. I'm not, shitting on that style either. But I like those scenes where the camera is just like, it's there. And it is just these characters like going at it. Or there aren't a ton of cuts. So you're like, I think these actors probably were playing that full scene out top to bottom, whereas like, I don't know, filmmaking is an interesting thing, and I don't know enough to be like, this is this kind of shot, blah, blah, blah. But I know enough to say, I do like when they just let the camera roll and let that scene play out. But you're right. It's not like the most interesting visually or in terms of like what this, I think this won best cinematography though, that year that it was released.
Oh,
or the year that was up for Academy Awards. I think it did.
Yeah, the way it's presented, I don't think there's anything like lacking in it or anything. It was just an observation I had towards the end of the movie. It was like, what did I take away from this? And I'm like, I wrote down the visuals, and I'm like, okay, normally when I write that down in my notes, I'm going to talk about like, well, the outfits look good and the sets look good and the background and the matte paintings and blah, blah, blah. And this time I was like, well, okay, but what'll always kind of end up in there is some kind of like camera work bullshit, like that's the like
right.
That kind of stuff. And I was like, I just didn't notice anything like that. The camera was just kind of, the camera was where it needed to be for the scene, and that's about it. It was not moving around much. It was just you get your old turny camera shot. That's the technical term, because I do know everything about filmmaking, and it has a lot of those.
Yeah, I think there's nothing that was like particularly striking in this movie in terms of like any of the design, or like you're talking about costumes or like even the set, stuff like that. I think everything just seemed very authentic.
I will say Anthony Hopkins had some good looks going on throughout this movie.
He did.
I liked his style. Like, because I think the first time you see him, he's a colonel or whatever. But then I think when they're like kids around the house, he's got this like really like tight haircut, and he's got his mustache, and he's got like just like really nice outfits. He just looks really put together, probably more so than like a person actually in that scenario would look. Like he's clearly like, even when his hair gets a bit longer and it's kind of wavy, like before he has the stroke, but like he kind of like, years have gone by since he's been in the military. It still just looks really put together and stylishly done. Like you could take that kind of look and throw it in, an urban location today, and people would be like, that guy's got style.
Yeah, he looked great. I thought all like the styling and everything was what felt good, even though this was like really over the top. I feel like there are a lot of people who haven't seen this movie. I recommend it. I think it's kind of a classic. I was going to say it's fun. It's not fun, but I think it's worth a watch. And I just like how everything just leans fully into what this movie is. Like it makes no, like I said, it makes no apologies for what it is. Everyone commits. I think it pays off in the end. I don't think everyone's going to love this movie, but I think people who maybe have been hesitant about it should give it a shot if people haven't seen it.
Yeah, I would. I don't know. I'm trying to think of who I could even recommend this to. I don't know. It's pretty good. If for whatever reason the general premise or style of it is appealing to you in any way, it's worth checking out. I think it's a competently done movie. Well, beyond that, I think it is a good movie. I really do. I think that what it does with the characters and the story it tells there is compelling, that it kept me interested for over 2 hours. And like, this is not the kind of movie I would have predicted I would have enjoyed as much.
I'm glad.
I'm growing as a person.
Oh, just like our friend Tristan. I'm going to give this movie... I'm going to add a 0.5 for nostalgia's sake and for comfort's sake. I'm giving this movie an 8.5 wild horses. No, I don't like half a horse. I'm going to give this movie 8 horses out of 10 horses. Wild horses. Announcing Tristan's return to the homestead out of 10.
Nice. I'm going to give this 7.5 cool Alfred slow-mo reloading rifle shots out of 10.
I just have to say, I love how much you're leaning to Team Alfred.
He's great. I really do.
Don't.
I like him.
I like him too, but I think most people are like, Tristan's the main man. Tristan's fine too. But it's nice to meet a fellow Alfred sympathizer.
We're going to have a secret handshake.
All right. Well, I think that's it for Legends of the Fall. If you like what we're doing, if you could give us a review wherever you're listening to us, that would be much appreciated. You can follow us on Instagram or Facebook at xpostwatcho, or you can email us at xpostwatcho@gmail.com. Next week, Jason, I'll let you share what we're watching for next week.
We're going to watch Aliens. Alien plural. It's the second one. I'm excited. It'll be a fun one.
Yeah. So tune in. Thanks for listening, and you'll hear our voices then. Bye-bye.